Okay, as people are trickling in, just going to start to kick it off by introduce myself first, and then my co-host over here. So I'm Isaac MUSLI. I'm the co-founder of the Aesthetic Success, the 4S Summit. A little bit about my background. I was born and raised in Israel, grew up around technology, and really born as an entrepreneur. Almost want to say, started businesses at a very young age. Moved to the state in 2007, joined the startup, I was the sixth employee on that startup, growing to become the general manager, helped to exit that startup, and right after that, started to work on a business intelligence dashboard. I had the luxury to be the first business intelligence dashboard in the aesthetic industry, which really got me into the data and the finance and all the operation side of aesthetic practices, all types, working with hundreds of practices, sold this company, started a lead management platform, got acquired by Simplus THR, which is an EMR platform for aesthetic practices. Again, got the chance to really learn in depth even of those type of workflows and processes. And about a year and a half after that, I joined Terry Ross, the amazing consultant of our industry, as a co-CEO, launched together Apex Platform. About 2 years ago, we merged this a solution with Clarity Technologies, which at the time was Engage Technologies. And right before that merger, we actually launched the Aesthetic Success, which is a very unique conference summit that focuses on business purely. We run it a few times a year. It's a pretty boutique type of meeting. We don't try to be one of those big ones. And we really focus on workshops and hands-on practice learning, anything between how to sell, how to generate more revenue, how to maximize your patients and opportunities in your practice, to how to run it from the financial side, setting up goals, operational efficiencies, and everything that has to do with that. And so today on the call, I have the honor to be joined with Mike White, who is a partner at CLA. It's one of the top accounting firms for aesthetic practices in dental. And Mike, please introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My background is a little bit more geographically constrained. Grew up in North Dallas and still live in North Dallas as well. But, appreciate this and appreciate everybody joining here. So my name is Mike White, CPA by trade, but similar to Isaac, kind of a serial entrepreneur. Have started and sold 6 different businesses, most recently actually a motorcycle dealership of all things. But in my day job is a CPA and helping entrepreneurs and business owners, if you will, with these discussions. What is a financial statement? Why are they important? What does it mean from an exit standpoint? What's been exciting in the aesthetic space, which I've learned through the dental and physician space before that, is private equity and capital is coming to the market so much quicker than we saw in other industries. So discussions like tonight is definitely worth the conversation and worth you guys really, investing into this time. So we appreciate that very much. So we want tonight to be a very open dialogue, which I know is hard to do in a Zoom type call, but type in questions, interrupt us, let us know. Feel like this is a very open forum. We almost call this a fireside chat, and let us know you've given up some time here, and we want to make sure this is a valuable time. We do have some thoughts and questions and things to lead through the conversation, but again, certainly happy to pivot along the way. The other thing is I'm going to try to keep these antlers from the decorative stag behind me out of the video as much as I can, but it's certainly fun for it to be in the background. So it is a fake stag. I've had those questions. You can tell by the glasses on the bronze bears. So, but we threw up some questions, and we're going to come back to these along the way, but we really want to just get a feel for who's in the room and what's important to you. And you'll see by these questions where we're going to be going with some of this conversation.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. And I second that, really encouraging you to use the chat. We have our host actually of this webinar is Grania. She's in the background. She's going to manage the chat. She's going to send some polls. Please interact with us. We did prepare a couple of topics, really hot topics, things that we hear very often, especially at this time of, I'll say, state of the world to some degree. There is a lot of uncertainty, and that creates a lot of questions. So without further ado, we only have 1 hour, and we already consume about 10 minutes of it. So I'm going to jump into probably the hottest topic and one of the main question that I hear recently, maybe in the last 6 weeks or so, more than ever. Recession is around the corner. What should I do? What should I keep an eye on? Mike, you work with a lot of practices, managing for them all the accounting, a lot of the budgeting side. What practices should do in order to survive, assuming that it is a recession? We may not going to hit anything, but if it is, what people should reserve now in order to be protected?
Yeah. And it's a matter of when, not if, right? If we look at the centuries of data that tell us, you know, on the backs of great times is sometimes troubling times. And it may not be the greater economy. Sometimes it's just the local industry as well, and pivot and changes in consumer preferences or whatnot. What we've seen over the last, you know, call it few years, is those consumer spending habits, especially coming out of COVID, with all of that stimulus in the economy, has really driven a lot of consumer spending. I think this holiday season, really going into next year, is going to decide and drive a lot of that granularity into, you know, what do we expect, and without all the stimulus, so the consumer is still going to be coming out in troves. So we're excited to see that. You know, recession looming or otherwise, and hopefully we're not predicting that. I think with lowering interest rates and certainly getting the election cycle behind us in the coming weeks, I think we'll see a lot more stability in the marketplace. But I'm always going to tell a business owner to have those cash reserves. Understand, what are we doing with our business? When times are great, you tend to be a little bit more loose, especially this time of year, saying, well, I need to save money in taxes, so I'm going to go buy this new piece of technology or new piece of equipment, or, you know, allow those one-off decisions to drive the long-term decisions within your practice. I love 3 months of operating cash within the business. And operating cash for a lot of folks is purely everything that isn't production related. So not injectables, not, you know, associate production or anything along those lines, but really focus on 3 months in there, and 3 months either available through a line of credit or through personal savings that you can inject back into the business as well. That's going to lead into a lot of conversation tonight of how do I know what my operating expenses are? So, but what are your thoughts, Isaac? What are you telling everybody to do right now?
Yeah, I like that thumb rule. I always advise, even without recession, always to keep about 3 months of operation in cash, in the bank, ready to move to whatever happened, right? And I think it's just safety measurements and time like that. I think that what people tend to do at coming to the end of the year, they're starting to think about the regular thumb rule. I should spend the money and get some tax breaks on profits and stuff like that. And I think that this year, my advice is don't. Hold your cash. Cash is king. You never know what's going to happen. And really start to plan into the next year's strategies. You can use that cash then to buy stuff. There will be a lot of more attractive deals. As you mentioned, Mike, interest rate is going to go down. Don't use your cash to buy everything in cash right now. You want a new machine. All your patients are asking from you this machine. You have a provider. You have the capacity. Opportunity is there. Do a finance. Later you can figure it out. And you rather do that than try to save a couple of hundreds or thousands even by using your cash and maybe later be in a problem.
I've seen too many, you know, and as a CPA, and obviously tax always becomes that question, but I see so many folks in Q4 sitting down with a tax CPA or just trying to say, man, I want to spend less in taxes. So they spend $1 to save 30 cents, and they need that dollar in the future, right? Or they need the 70 cents that would have been left over if they paid the taxes. And to Isaac's point, when we're thinking about that equipment piece, a lot of folks I have seen, and I know Isaac has, because we've had this conversation, buy this big new piece of equipment, have all these things that their patients are ready for, but once they spent the money on the equipment, there wasn't a plan of implementing that piece of equipment. There wasn't training in place. They didn't have anywhere to put it. So it's in a box in the back, just gaining dust. Yes, they saved money, but they're still making that lease equipment payment or capital payment every single month, and they're not getting the benefit. So long-term, it's going to end up costing you more to really make the assessment and take the time. What is the plan to get a piece of equipment? As Isaac's mentioning, don't not get it because what we're saying, but truly have a plan before you do it and understand, have you checked all those other boxes on cash flow and other bills you got to pay, and substantiating the balance sheet if things soften a little bit.
Yeah, and don't of course don't panic if your practice is a bit slow lately. We actually, based on our analysis around practices, we've seen right around 17% reduction in productivity, booking to the future, conversions, almost on all aspects. And I want to say, and be careful when I say it, but I've seen it all around, all businesses, all industry. Mike, you just sold a motorcycle business. I'm sure that you involve in other businesses too.
Yeah.
You see it all across the board. It's just that uncertainty, people, customers reserving cash as well.
Well, and you got to think how much consumers spend. I mean, trillions of dollars were put into the economy, and thankfully we got out of the dealership right before the spending cut. But the new owners, we kept up with them, and sure enough, it just dropped off like a cliff for them. People weren't spending as much money. They didn't have as much of that pent-up cash. And, they're maxing out the credit cards, and we're all seeing those credit card numbers. Credit card balances are at all-time highs in our economy, if you will. And we really think about that. It's like, all right, how does that impact the decision? How does that impact the decision of a patient that is looking at this treatment plan that we proposed? Are we willing to come off our price a little bit just to get some more revenue in the door, cash flow? There's a lot that really gets into those decisions when the economy softens a little bit.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, we would love if you guys can share on the chat again if you've seen a reduction or if you crack some nut over there and figured out how to get to people to buy more. We know, of course, the buy now, pay later, financing options. I support all of them. We teach a lot of that in the 4S when we work with you and how to make the right calculation. It's not always makes sense. You need to make sure you protect also your profitabilities. And there is ways to make it work where everybody wins between you, the practice, and of course the patient. So actually, we speak already on 4S, and as you know, I teach a lot about how to analyze the P&L, how to restructure that, and people believe and they start to get a little bit much more comfortable looking at their numbers. And then one of the questions, right, is, so do I need a CPA at this point? I know how to do bookkeeping, I understand my numbers. Mike, elephant in the room, you have a CPA firm. Why people need a CPA if they know their numbers?
It's sometimes that entrepreneurs, that person that's going to second guess your sanity. As entrepreneurs, everybody on this call, we own our business, we run the business. I guarantee you're looking at your bank account every day and you're looking at your end-of-day reports. I still do it, right? I still do it every single day. I'm used to that cadence, and I think I have a good pulse of what's happening. But when we start looking at the bankability, borrowing money, getting a possible private equity event, or bringing on a small partner, or opening that next location, having the story, and you'll hear me, certainly speak at 4S, have me speak about telling your financial story and making sure that your bookkeeping or your CPA is pulling all those pieces together and presenting your financial statements in a way that makes sense and increases the value of your business. One of the things that I talk about a lot, I do a free analysis of anybody I talk to. I know I do this a lot with 4S and the clients that you guys work with. I've been doing this for about 15, 20 years. And over that period of time, I look at about 20 businesses a month. And I've only seen less than a dozen businesses that I couldn't tear apart their financials. And that's opportunities when you're looking at a bank, you're looking at a private equity partner, you're working with somebody that they're devaluing your books and records because of how they're put together. So when I look at this, it's beyond the tax return. And a lot of CPAs and a lot of folks use their CPA just for tax preparation. But if there's not, whether it's IZHAK, somebody on the 4S and Apex team really working through what is this data telling you and what decisions are you making with this data, it just gives you an opportunity to step back and really analyze it, especially with somebody like you and myself that are in this industry and kind of live and breathe this industry every day.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's exactly, I think that another eye, even if you understand, and that's a lot of what I emphasize, knowing it, helping you to have a much better and healthier discussion about it. You can ask the right question and not just be like, oh, tell me what to do. Because a lot of times CPAs don't know your business. You know their business, you live it, you breathe it, you know your plans, and you can come up with the right question and not just those questions that you may not gonna like the answers because they did not make sense. Now, speaking of,
and if you're CPA, and I'll say, and this goes for, and I'm live and breathe CPA. I married another CPA, right? So Dinner talk is amazing all the time. But when you look at that, if you're only utilizing that conversation for year end, there's a business to run 12 months a year, 365 days a year, that things happen. And we want to be that first call. And I know we share this with IZHAK and the team. We want to be that first call you're making of, hey, I just lost a major producer. I don't know what the impact of my business is going to be, or I really need to expand next door. What does this look like as it relates to the bigger picture of what I'm trying to accomplish? All of those conversations, that's where you should be able to, take your CPA relationship to another level, beyond just sending them data at year end and doing it 12, and I call it the 1231 flush. It means every other month of that year is wrong as well when you're trying to plan your financial statements and put a budget together.
100%. I think that it's one of the key in holding people accountable for looking at the numbers and understand what they mean and then make the right decision, not being impulsive. So even for nothing else, just somebody to call before you sign on that new machine for $300,000 and say, does this make sense? That can save you a lot of money. I've seen it myself so many times. So speaking about spending, I'm sorry, go ahead. If you have more to add on this topic.
No, go for it. Go for it. I think we're going the same place.
The next topic actually has a lot to do with this, right? So we talked about there is some uncertainty. There is talk about reserve the cash. But let's talk a little bit about budget planning and how far people now should plan when it's uncertain and into the future, right? They should start to plan this quarter. They should just float and see what happened in the election and then start to plan. How would you tackle that?
Man, I love this. And this is where IZHAK and I became fast friends, because I love budgets. And when I budget, it's not just saying, hey, I want to do $1 million in revenue and let's just divide by 12 and call it a day. We know every month, we know Q4 can be softer. We know people are choosing holidays over procedures. We know that when you have somebody go on holiday in July, what the impact is of that business. And when you start thinking about the impacts of your business and the practice, having a roadmap of every single month of 2025, when are you wanting to hire another person? When are you wanting to expand that space? But take the data from the technology IZHAK built. How many rooms do we have? How many producers do we have? What's the average revenue per case? All of that KPIs that are driving what we see on the income statement and the balance sheet allows us to tell the story. Something's wrong. And IZHAK used the word accountability earlier. I love that word. If there's a number that is on a page, any page that we have, somebody's got to be accountable to that number and driving those decisions. So I'm a big budget proponent. It's not just say, hey, put it together in December, November, and never do it again. You need to say, hey, this is what I did, and then live in a 90-day window. Okay, what did we do in quarter one as compared to what we expected? I'd prefer you do it monthly, but for some people, it's baby steps. So if we go in there and say, hey, what did we do in quarter one versus what we thought we were going to do? And what decisions do we need to change in order to hit those goals? Sharing that insight also with your CPA changes tax planning throughout the year, changes your lending relationship, changes all of those components, and of course gets back to accountability. But
yeah, I want to touch a little bit on budgets and just for people that with us on this call, budgets are pretty much applicable to say goals to your business, right? It's a planning, it's what you're going to make, what you're going to spend, it's anything around that. And there is multiple formulas to come into that. One of the challenges in our business, especially in our industry, it's to your point, Mike, it's seasonal, right? So Q4, you should see an increase in the non-surgical, a decrease on your surgical if you are med spa mixed with plastic surgery because it's the holiday season. People don't want to do now a full remake and then come to the holiday dinner when everybody asks them a question. Ultimately, the best surgeries are the ones that you don't know what people did. And so for the budgeting, what will be your kind of like, let's say 3 tips how to hit it the right way when you work budget?
Yeah, well, first I want to acknowledge that, 75% of you are putting together a budget today, and that's an incredible number. And so happy to see that, because I would think this is a very abnormal room, but it's probably why you're on a call on a late evening on a Tuesday. So glad to see that, glad to see when you're putting that together and utilizing that. And I think next time we'll do a polling question is now what you're doing with that budget. But when I start with the conversation of where do I start, I look at everything on a 12-month rolling trend report. So what did I do in January versus what did I do last year? And you'd almost take that and say, okay, is there cyclical cycles to my business? And do I see it year over year for 2024 versus 2023 and 2022, the same trends month to month and the same months year over year? I would then export all my data from my practice management system. And IZHAK, I'd love to hear the 5 KPIs you would focus on. And I would correlate that or look at the January practice management data versus the January income statement. And are they different? Are they close? Is there a timing difference on how we're doing collections? But what are you seeing on the trends? Are you seeing a production per case is actually declining because the volume's picking up? And how are you going to change? But what are those 5 KPIs you always tell folks to focus on when they're starting to lay that out?
I'll start with the revenue drivers. I think those are some of the most important. In any business, no matter what business you are, there is 2 revenue drivers. They're kind of like the core. How many patients do you see? How much each one of them spend on average? I think this is the most important, and most practices don't look at it. And then once you have that, then you start to look at your conversion rate, because you think about it like a funnel, right? So if I know how many patients I see and I know how much people spend on average, it's a multiplier game, right? I can either increase the amount that each one of them spend, that's a nice multiplier, or I can get more patients to spend the same average amount. I increase my profitability. So I will say that that's going to be the first 2. The second one will be conversion rates. I think that there is some confusions around conversion rates because there is few of them. There is a conversion rate on the marketing side, which means how many leads did you get, how many of them are qualified, and then how many of them schedule a consult. That's the first conversion rate, and that's monitor really your quality of your marketing. And again, there is a lot of arguments about what type of lead source convert more and less, but in general, it's really goes down to the next KPI, which how much you spend on average for qualified leads that schedule a consult against your total marketing expense. I always say, don't try to learn marketing tomorrow. You need to understand the basics, like you need to understand the basics of all your moving pieces if you're the business owner, but you don't need to be a marketing expert. You just need to know, I give you this budget, what you tell me you're going to do with it makes sense. Now let's see how many patients I got thanks to that, how much each one of them cost me on average. It's a super key to understand, because that's how you can manage your marketing budget the best, which means if for $1,000 spent on marketing, which is probably 10 times this amount on average, you generate 10 leads, right? You know that it's about $100 per lead. You spend another $1,000, you'll double that amount. You'll spend the double, but you know how much you're going to make, which is the key to predict the growth and how much more capacity do you have, which will be the 4th KPI. Capacity by providers. People go buy machines, open another locations, doing all of those crazy stuff, spending so much money on marketing, but they don't even have where to fit all those people. They don't have where to do it, right? They have maybe, and then those machines start to get pushed into the back little room in the end of the office and make dust, and only some of the other machines works, and because some of the providers you have only like some sort of machines, and I think that those are going to be the key. And the last, and probably one of the most important, is your gross profit. Understand what do you sell and how much money you have left from each one of those. It's much easier to get people to come and buy Botox for cheap, but you're likely going to lose money from that. So unless you can convert them into other procedures that you need to know, like laser skin tightening, where that has 90% profitability or stuff like that, unless you build it in, if you try to rely your business just on injectables, your destiny is not going to be the most positive. You're not going to be the richest med spa on the corner. So unless you're one of those like huge chains that's kind of like the core business, you buy it for very cheap and you get those bulk pricing, and even then the profitability on injectables is one of the lowest. So I think that those are top 5 that I would say that people really need to keep a close eye on and run the business by it. It's a key. You know what? I have one more. And we're going to touch it a lot, actually, in 4S. I just block time to speak with everybody about that one in very specific. NPS score, or CSAT, Customer Satisfaction or Net Promoter Score. Everybody on this call, and I always, everybody on this call know this, what is NPS. If you don't know what it stands for, you don't know what Net Promoter Score stands for, it's that question that you get every time you finish with your car service or check out from hotels or something you get. Would you recommend this business to your friends and family or colleague or You can phrase it in any way you want, and it's a 1 to 10 normally meter, and there is only one correct answer, 10, which means that that's a reflection that everything you do in your business from a patient experience, you do it the right way. Your services are quality, your pricing in the right place, your front desk is smiley, answering the right time, waiting times are in the right place, or else people, the bathroom are clean. You have no idea how much is actually reflect on your business operation, because or else people will not give 10. They will give a 9, they will give an 8, which is also fine. It's great to know that because you know you have rooms to improve, but you really want to score that 10. And the more you're going to score that 10, then you're becoming Disney, you're becoming this Carlton, right? Ritz-Carlton, all of those ones that we know, it's because of those NPS. That is the live or die by those numbers. So I suggest if you don't already survey your patients and ask them, how are your experience today? And you'll learn fountain of knowledge you're going to get out of it.
It's such a scary sentiment of getting feedback and asking for said feedback. But I think when you think about all these KPIs and when you leave this conversation, it's going to be very easy to get overwhelmed of all the data I need to track. And many of you, again, if you're doing budgets, you're probably tracking a lot of this data already. The big thing is taking action and not trying to live in this whack-a-mole type model where you're trying to fix everything every single month, and now you have all these fire drills and really not doing anything strategically to move that ball forward. You know, I always say, I'm a big EOS guy, rocket fuel traction, all of those, but you know, the basics of it is have your big goal, but live in a 90-day cadence of, hey, everybody on my team, including myself, is focused on this. If it's NPS score, all the things around NPS score, grabbing that data, getting it digestible, getting the information, and now what to do with it, measuring that over time. If it's marketing, I have seen so many times, Isaac, that situation you laid out of we're spending all this money on marketing, but we actually have no capacity to take on a new patient. And we're just spending the money because we feel like we have to, because otherwise we're going to go somewhere else. But if we're spending money just to spend money, it really doesn't matter. And I think there's this whole idea and concept, and I saw it in the physician world, the dental world, the more I spend on marketing, the higher my revenue. And there is a break-even point depending on what you're marketing for. If you're going for the loss leader of injectables and that's all you're doing, your margins are going to, show you exactly what you're doing, especially if marketing is kind of eroding a lot of that. There is this magic percentage within your practice that makes sense to spend, and of course, monitor that along the way. I've also seen people on the flip side get to their capacity and just kill the marketing. Well, there's always natural attrition. So again, you have to monitor what kind of new patient flow do we need to have to substantiate what that looks like. I think the other question we get a lot, Isaac, is do I need more than one location, right? I see this marketplace, I see what's happening, and everybody, again, from a competition standpoint is, oh, I need to keep growing, and let me replicate what I have. This magic that I've created, I bet I can do it again 10 miles later. And I would say most folks, which is where I would say to these other specialties is a little different, they don't care if you have 20 locations. If your EBIT across 20 locations is the same as 3. Right, it's a lot less headaches. And so if you really think about what your box is, what your replicability of the business model you're trying to build is in your process, and really dial that in, when you go to an exit plan 5 years from now, 10 years from now, next year, at the end of the day, it's going to show a lot better that you have standard operating procedures and systems to run and dial that kind of location. So not to pop around too much going back to the KPI, but as we think about that budgeting and really dialing in that metric, it's important to know what you're building towards. And of course, the big question, Isaac, and I'd love to hear the transparency question. And this, as a business owner, was actually something I coached on, consulted on for years, but I myself did not share a lot of data probably for 5 or 6 years with my team. It's that uncomfortable feeling, right? It's that feeling of saying, well, how much do you want them to know? So what are you typically recommending is that first person who gets to know revenue data or P&L data? Where do you start with that conversation, especially with budgeting?
I start with the psychology behind it, because I think that most business owners don't understand that the assumption of their employees is much worse than the reality that actually. They're in
Yeah.
their mind, you're taking bags and boxes to the bank at the end of every month. They're busting their ass, and you're just sitting at home and burn money into the fire. That's what they envision, especially in aesthetic practices. When there is, it's a good business. You can
Yeah.
make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there's providers, they want to know that they are contributors, and sometimes they can do the back on the envelope, right? They know, oh, I've seen 20 patients today. Each one of them, I know that I charge a couple of thousands. This doctor made a lot of money today on me. And I think that that assumption is very scary when it comes to morale and culture around your practice. And you rather them to know not just how much money they generate. And I think that that is the greatest mistake that I see. Is actually important for them to understand profitability. It doesn't have to go to the very nitty gritty on every little thing, and they don't have to be a business partner that you need to consult with them before you spend money or anything like that. It's nothing like that. It's really understand that even if they are providers and they're injectables, let's say, which was that probably one of the most common one, and generate $2 million a year, just all day, injecting, right? Charging people on Botox, hundreds of dollars, thousands sometimes. If you explain to them, and you just take one syringe as example, and you show them how from that, and I have actually chart that I always show on my talks, how the dollar trickles down, and you show them that $1 that they generate, you actually, before you pay taxes or anything like that on your personal stuff, you have left around 25 cents from that dollar. They start to appreciate the business. They start to appreciate more you providing all those benefits, you giving them a free surgery to the ones that do, you giving them all of those other benefits, those days off, all of those vacation, all of those fun stuff also cost money. So I'm a big believer in transparency. Again, it doesn't have to be on every little detail. I like to scope it around the people and their productivity so they understand how they impact the overall success. They want the business to be success. I'm a big believer also in I'm not going to use share the wealth, right? It's not like everybody have to be rich in the practice. You're the business owner, you take the liability, you build it from the ground up, you did the hard work, you managing all those stuff, right? That they don't need to worry about. They just come in the morning, and if they're unhappy, they go find a different job. For that, there is a fee, right? That's why they get paid. But if you did kill that and you have goals, and we're going to get into goals because I think that that is the key to the transparency. If they hit their goals and they over surpass them, or as a business you set the goals and everybody follow, and you overachieve, that means you made more than you planned to make. That extra is totally fine. Give bonuses, encourage your team, make it as a family. Think about them. They are your partner. They may not be your partner in a decision making, but they are your partner in part of the success, because without them, you won't be able to do it alone. So I think that that's the psychological side of it. The practical side, I think it's all has to do with goals. There is methods, we work it, right? I'm a big believer in the SMART goals because it's very simple to everybody to Google and understand how it works and structure goals to their team. Everybody in the practice needs to have a goal. Everybody at all time needs to be able to look at the mirror and say, I'm doing a great job, or I'm doing a horrible job. And everybody going to know about it because they need to present their goals in the company meetings. When you have those monthly team meetings, they come and they say, this is my goal. Here is where I am. I know I'm going to hit it, or I'm about to not hit it. And then you're going to get the opportunity to ask why and how can you support them, and the entire team share that sentiment on really working towards that goal, because every goal is part of the bigger mission, which is to make the business successful. So that's my approach to transparency. I don't think every little detail needs to be, but I think it needs to be enough for people to understand, one, and not everything that they put in the cash register goes to your bank. You take home and run with it. Two, they need to understand how much they contribute and how do they contribute, right? In many times I've seen estheticians making more profits than nurse injectors that do Botox, just because the service is a lot more profitable. Pure as that. How do you approach it?
Well, and we heard from the right? We heard from the room a third full transparency, and the rest of you some type of select information or no transparency at all. And it still is true. I think we go back to the very first question of common financial statements for ourselves, and the importance of us understanding so we can then translate that data and help other folks understand their financials as well. when you get to that point of full transparency or transparency into the select information within your practice, don't just share a financial statement and say, here you go, this is what it means. Actually sit down with a game plan of what are we doing with this data now that we're sharing it? What is our intention? As we think about, frankly, the competition of keeping great and retaining great talent today, it just seems like the employment pool is shrinking every single day, and less folks are really wanting to engage, nor do they care what their long-term plan. They have their own vision for life, which is great, but we're all competing for a different level of talent today, and I think it's just going to get harder and harder. So as we think about really understanding what are we doing with this data and how do we bring our team's goals into our conversation, I think it's so important. Isaac, I like to share the story. One of my year-end reviews and conversations, but one of my favorite team members who helped me build my dashboards back in the day, I remember talking to him like, what are your goals? And I was incorporating them into our business model and wanting to achieve them. And, basically I was just doing a year-end review and making sure I helped him understand how he contributed. And he came in on a Monday and said, hey, you inspired me to quit and move to New York City. And that wasn't my intention at all. But, it's one of those things that if we know our team members' intentions as well, they want to go open a competing, clinic down the road. Well, how do we incorporate them into our business? How do we help them do it? And that's also a good way for you to open another location if you're partnering with somebody who is going to leave you otherwise. And so there's so many aspects of this that you can really incorporate when you start becoming transparent, when you start not only understanding your business, but understanding what they want to do as well.
Yeah, 100%. Anybody is mutual respect to each other, right? And people feel more comfortable to share. And I think support and self-growth is really high priority. And we see it in a lot of the surveys that we do around employment. It's not only about the money. It's really not. It's about appreciation and it's about the opportunity for growth. They take a higher position for employees to choose whether to stay in the practice or leave the practice. Those two scores higher than salary. People need to make paid, they need to be paid fairly. And if they paid fairly, and you also give them appreciation and they feel like family and they feel open and they know that you're going to help them if they're in a problem, you'll understand them and you're going to support them. I think that it's really going to be, it's a way to success with employment. I'm going to open it up for some questions. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, we had a couple of direct questions come in. If I'm planning on selling my practice in the next few years, what do we want to do now to increase that value? I don't know if you want to start, Isaac, or I can jump in. And
I can give a couple of points. I'll say one of the points I'm actually going to circulate back to you, because one of the first things that when I speak to practices is I'm going to open another location. I'm going to buy another practice before I'm going to sell, so I can show a bigger portfolio. Huge mistake, because that's literally 2 steps back. Unless you have really robust processes, it's never going to perform the same as your first location or your second location. It's a stretch. You need the management, a lot of those things in consideration. Increasing value, memberships, I'll say loyalty programs, memberships. Those are really, if you can predict cash flow and predict revenue, that is a key. If you can retain customer base, that's what a lot of those investors are looking for. They want to know that when you give them the keys, it's not just going to dunk because everybody wants you. They have a legal obligation. They have money in the bank. They know that patients are going to continue to come and will help to then support that transition. Every business that gets sold out, I don't think I've seen one that sold and instantly took off. Most of them take 2 steps back, and then depends on the acquirer and depends on the company and the group, then they start to scale back up. Normally they scale up way more than before, because they have that robust operation now that back them up. But the natural feeling or between the employees and the same kind of like election, right? There is a lot of unknown, a lot of facilitation. Are they going to be good? They're going to be bad. Services is going to be like that. Salary is going to go up, high, same services, all of that stuff. People wonder, that creates instant decline always in productivity. And then you start to scale back up if things working out.
I always talk about, this is a really big conversation for us in general, but I always kind of think of and try to bring personal experiences. A lot of folks we talk to, and Isaac, I know you're talking to a lot of the same ones, is well, I'm not selling anytime soon. So I almost put these in buckets. My goal is to sell in the next 1 to 3 years. My goal is never to sell. My goal, I'm not worried about that today. I'm still growing. And I think in each one of those phases, so I'll take the first phase of, I plan on selling in the next 1 to 3 years or the next 0 to 3 years. Know this, the marketplace is robust. There's a lot of good opportunities, but I don't want anybody to fear like they're missing out, right? We are early days in the consolidation or, private equity of aesthetic space and practices today. Sub 4 or 5%, I would even say sub 3.5%, depending on who you're asking. Practices are affiliated with a group. Compare that to dental, where it's 35 to 40%. Physicians, it's like 45 to 50. Veterinary, it's like 70%. We were a long way away. But with that being said, I want you market ready at any given time. And what I mean by that is your financial statements are in good shape. You've ticked and tied your legal documents. You have long-term agreements. And to what IZHAK just mentioned, if you're very instrumental to your day-to-day, they're going to expect you to be around 3 to 5 years. If you're saying, man, I want to retire and be done in 3 to 5 years, then you probably need to be going to market soon in order to hit that time. If you're earlier than that, like, oh, I have time, I can, be around, then look at that as it relates to your overall conversation. If you're in that middle bucket saying, I am building to sell, but I'm not there yet from a conversation standpoint. Again, I go back to the market ready. When I ultimately sold my CPA firm, I was 36 years old. I had started it when I was 23. We were a top 400 CPA firm out of 45,000 firms in the US. And I wasn't planning on selling, but I only had 2 minority partners, lovely Irishman, loved the guy, but he was wanting to retire. And then I had Debbie, who actually, at 41 years old, had terminal cancer, and it just completely on a dime changed the day. And I was like, I don't want to do this by myself. And I didn't have that next tranche of leaders coming up. So we made the decision to move, but it was such a quick process because we were market ready in that process. So even if it's not part of your now consideration, being your financial statements are in good working order, you understand your SOPs, you understand what that looks like, that same decision could have been just to go open another location or expand with an acquisition of my own. So think about that bucket. If you're in that latter bucket of, I don't know what my goals are, but at some point you're going to have a succession plan, whether it's internally or externally. Again, I start looking towards what are you building towards? What is that goal? And build that team around it. Your wealth advisor, your banker, your attorney, all those good people, and build that advisory board. So as you're setting those not only annual 12-month goals, but 3, 5, 10, 15-year goals, you're working towards what the marketplace wants to see. And of course, you're getting ready along the way.
Yeah, and just to emphasize what Grania put on the chat, we are going to have an M&A panel during our 4S in December 5th to 8th. Join us. You're going to be able to ask a lot of questions. You're going to have Mike actually on the stage as part of the panel. You're going to have Skytel, who are brokerage. You're going to have Huron, who are actually an acquirer of many practices. And there will be just wealth of knowledge, and you can ask anything you want. We've seen a lot of deals going south and a lot of deals being successful. There is many variables to be taken into consideration. I'll say one of the main ones you need to always take into consideration. It's not just about the money. You ultimately, as a business owner, you're an entrepreneur. How do you see it all play for you? It's one of the probably the main question to ask yourself before considering sell or not sell or any of those. And I'll say the second probably one that I like to mention to people is what you do this year counts, but it doesn't only count. They're always going to look 3 years back. So you cannot just squeeze business and all of a sudden make a great year and expect people buy you based on that. It's always going to go 3 years records. So join us today. I'm going to show a slide here, and we have a special as appreciation to everybody who attended us today with a discount for the 4S coming in December. I know that Granny is going to put a slide that explains how to get it. But I see that we also got yes, here you go.
Right on top of it.
Yeah. So this is again, you can get a discount. Use this data webinar 500 and you get a 500 discount. Wow, Grania, generous. Also a good opportunity. We talked about valuation, and I mentioned membership, and membership can come in so many ways, shape, or forms.
Yeah.
One of the trends that we see, and we actually set an entire workshop on the Sunday at 4S just for that, it's a loss weight. We're going to have Johnny Franco, Dr. Johnny Franco from Texas, who generates over $1 million a month from his membership program for loyalty, for loss weight. I cannot encourage you more to participate that and learn. If you're not aware of the trends that happens, it's growing faster than what Botox grew when it was at the time. It's solving so many problems. So people that never even consider aesthetic procedures are joining that and enjoying that. People who don't need to lose a lot of weight use it at different dosage, and there is really system. It's been robust. He really figured out. He's serving, and he's going to teach you all the blueprints during the workshop. So that is one of the greatest way also to build some valuation and that recurring revenue that we talked about. It's one of the keys. We have 10 minutes left, and I'd love everybody just put a lot of questions inside the chat. We would like to address that before we move on with, we have a few more points on our agenda to fill up the next 10 minutes, but I like it to be about you. It's about helping you and share all the knowledge that we have with you. So if you have any questions, shoot it in the chat. But then I'll ask a question, Mike. I know that it's a concern.
Yeah.
We're talking again about reduction in revenue because it's a point. It's a pain for a lot of practices. There is fixed cost in the practice. My expenses are kind of, I still need to pay the rent. I still need to pay a lot of things regardless to how much revenue I make. So my expenses stay high. My revenue goes down. Give us a few advices. How can I reserve cash?
You know, a couple things, and a lot of times it's some harder decisions that have to be made, right? There's only so much you can do with your rent and your space, and so much you can do relative to that. What I see in these times, when things get a little softer, folks try to get, one, a little blind to it, oblivious, where they just keep going and doing what they're doing without a change. The other side is they make way too many drastic changes, and now they've hindered the long-term viability of getting it turned around. You know, the big thing I always recommend is, well, why is it decreasing? Is it back to the NPS score, and all of a sudden our service provider has changed? The experiences are changing within the practice. Is something happening? Has a new practice opened down the road, and they're coming in and completely undercutting our price or marketing like crazy, and people are experiencing what does that look like, and what are they offering that we aren't? Is this everybody around me seems to be, you know, going down? Like with that data we talked about earlier, with those budgets, with that planning metrics, it allows us to truly help understand where is the revenue going. Secondarily, when times are good, what I've noticed with employees, and there is a word for this, and I can never remember what it is, but you give somebody 40 hours to fill of work to do, and they only have 20 hours really to do it, they're going to stretch it to 40 hours for that week. If all of a sudden, you know, times are slower and they really only have 20 hours a week, but we're paying them full time, truly understanding what each one of your team members are doing at any given time, and can any of that be automated with, you know, AI? Can any of that be automated or spread across other team members? Is it time to let go some of those underperforming staff members? Do you look at your inventory ordering process? What does that look like? Are you buying things 90 days at a time, but you're really not getting a discount for doing that? So you look at your buying habits and say, you know what? I want to preserve a little cash flow. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to dial in my ordering procedures. This is what I'm going to order, when I'm going to order it. But understanding the metrics, you know, sometimes this, you know, going back to marketing, sometimes this conversation is, if this is a competition thing, if this is a, you know, we've lost NPS score or something, sometimes I'm going to tell you to ramp up marketing or ramp up that patient experience to be able to grab those patients back in the door and re-engaged prior patients as well that may not have been there for some time. So what are you recommending?
My recommend goes again to team and culture. I think transparency helps companies go through hard times. And sometimes you can do all the right things and things still not going to play out just because the variables of the world and the location that you're in or whatever that is really out of your control. I would say it's not only your problem as a business owner. Nobody wants to lose their job. Nobody wants to start to look for a job, especially in times of uncertainty. It's not easy to do that, right? Share the problems. And again, that goes with the transparency. It's important for the team. You don't need to freak them out. Don't tell them, oh, guys, we're going to close the business in a month if we're not going to do well. But they need to know declines. They need to know when it's a hard time. And you'd be surprised if all your providers really care about the business and the performance, and they're all going to go on their social media and start to help to build the brand and get the awareness. Those are free advertising, free marketing. Your business is going to grow without a doubt. If they ask for referrals, referral programs are great things. By the way, for referrals, review, all of those things. If you want some recommendation, put it in the chat. I'm more than happy to circle back and connect with some really good companies that are affordable, can help you drive those engines in your business. And I think that that is the key for hard times, at least to me, any business that I had. And I'm an entrepreneur. I love startups, and startup is a roller coaster. Sometimes doing great, and then you have a few months that you're like, oh my God, I have to find investors, and you just work it as a team. If you work it as a team, people sometimes even going to defer a paycheck or two just to know that they can help the business to get back on their feet. And it means a lot. It means a lot to them. It means a lot to you, and you know who you can trust in a hard time. I think it's a great opportunity, culture builder, more than anything.
I love that conversation, just the engagement and the transparency of the team. What I don't want you to do is compound that with year-end tax planning, and where again you're going to buy that equipment, and, you know, I'll save some tax money, or I'll go try to compete with that practice down the road and go buy this piece of equipment because that's what we're doing. What is the plan around that? Is there a team member that says, if you invest in that, I'm going to be the champion to engage that in our practice, bring it to the patient base, and help you market the fact that we have that? You know, a lot of sudden decisions get made when things get a little tighter. And that's why it's important. I still like looking at your end-of-day reports, looking at your weekly reports, and compounding that on a monthly basis to see what are those trends telling us, and how does that look? You know, as it looks to the broader discussion, if you will, and what you're doing within your practice, you know, being able to look at the transparency behind all those is so important. But I love that with the employees, rallying them around what you're trying to do, and helping them, you know, be engaged in the excitement of you know, why this is a great place to be.
Yeah, and if you work the culture the right way, people will help you also to identify that weak links within your business. There is always those. And when we grew so fast, I think last year, almost every practice that I talked to, it is the best year I ever had, right after they had a horrible year before. And then they hired people and this and that. I promise you that unless you already did some squeezing, to your point, somebody who used to do something in 20, now do it in 40 because he can do it. It becomes a habit, then everything turns into 40 hours. You work it out, and you build the right culture of productivity, and people understand that this is a stress time. Your providers are going to take a step back from just pushing you all the time to try to make more. The employee is going to be more productive, and people will point out if they're going to not going to be able to get paid, and they know that the other person is not working well, they're not going to be embarrassed to come and tell you that. And there's different ways to approach how you want to know it. And again, I'm a big believer of a teamwork. I think that success is always a teamwork. So
yeah, and I know we have a couple minutes left. We had one question come in, and I would take this one offline, but recommendations on marketing companies or whatnot. If you want to reach out to IZHAK, he can have you some conversations around that, and work through it. But, you know, IZHAK, we got a couple minutes. I always like to leave these with a call to action. What's your other than registering for 4S? What's your call?
Again, that would be my main advice. 4S is December 5th to 8th in Fort Lauderdale, which is no better place to be in December in the US, right? You can enjoy at least the normal weather and not piles of snow. And more than anything, you're going to learn how to plan next year. If you haven't done that already, you're going to come way stronger. So we have 2 talk tracks. One is really focused on sales, maximizing revenue, conversion, all of that side, and it's Terry runs all of it, and she's truly the best in our industry by far from anybody else. And we are inviting other experts in other areas that we are not necessarily the master. In this, she is the master. I'm covering anything regarding the goals, the operation, the finance. Again, we're going to have Mike in the room. We're going to use a lot of different experts on those topics as well. Anybody that came to the 4S, we actually, I think, close to 100% on our net score. People love it. Go to our website and see the surveys yourself. Don't take my word. And again, you set yourself for success to next year.
You know, I love it, and I'm excited about being at it. Really love it when it's in my backyard in Dallas, but I'll be there in Florida as well. But you know, my one call to action is we work towards, you know, year end here, Q4. Hopefully, I see a lot of you, and we both see a lot of you in December. We would be happy to meet one-on-one and look at your stuff specifically. But what I always find out, and what I always talk to people, is if your balance sheet isn't correct, your income statement can't be. And where I say that so often when I speak to somebody and they're like, hey, here are my financials, this is what I look at, and they're only looking at their income statement, but the balance sheet has all these unreconciled accounts, has all these suspended payments, you know, things that don't even make sense. I would implore everybody on this call to say, all right, pull your 9/30 balance sheet and your 12/31/2023 balance sheet. Does that make sense? Do all the accounts on your balance sheet actually still exist? Are there any assets that are missing? I got a client the other day that sent me their balance sheet and it had $60,000 worth of equipment and build out. I'm like, don't you own your building? Where is that? Like, it's not on here at all. And they had no idea, and they'd been with their CPA years. Their building wasn't even on the balance sheet. So when you're looking at that conversation, make sure you're pulling that. And if you have any questions or trying to figure out how to read that, what it means, then again, we can talk about it later. You can reach out to me or we can sit down at the 4S. But look at your balance sheet, get it cleaned up, especially going into year end would be my one call to action. So
again, I want to thank everybody who joined us today. I hope that was good and valuable for you. And I hope to see you all in December. And please come and introduce yourself when we meet in person and let me know how was this webinar.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.